Hello and welcome to the Ask Karen podcast. I'm your host, I'm Karen, and I'm here to ask all the difficult questions so that we get to know the stories that we should know about. And as today is our very first podcast, I am really delighted to have join us in the studio today retired Detective Sergeant James Brannigan. James was working with the PSNI for 20 years. He was the lead investigator on numerous murder cases, including one where there was never a body found. He brought this murder through to the conviction. Hopefully that can be a future podcast. So James is here to talk to us about another very special case today, which is the case of Katie Simpson. When Katie died, it was initially ruled as a suicide. James was able to understand that it was something much more sinister. To know more about Katie's story, you should check out the newly released documentary, which is called Death of a Show Jumper. And it's a hard but incredible watch, and it really helps you understand who Katie was as a person. So I'm really delighted to have this story as our first podcast and welcome James in the studio today. James, tell us more about your background and about you.
I was a homicide detective in the police of Northern Ireland for over 18 years. Joined the police 2005, became a detective shortly after, and then main worked on homicide and counter-terrorist work. But it's the homicide work which was a passion and has ended up me sitting here doing these podcasts and documentaries.
Great. Thank you for joining us. And James isn't just any detective, so he's internationally recognized for leading Ireland's first ever no-body murder conviction. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it was the first no-body murder and to have somebody convicted where you have no body is extremely difficult, and it's obviously going to be a circumstantial case. But it was that tenacity, and you just had to be tenacious with investigations like that. And it was a difficult investigation, but it was the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Okay. So we've watched your documentary, Death of a Show Jumper. How did that come around?
Well, how did the investigation come around? It was during COVID, it was 2020, and I had been working from home. I was looking after some investigations. It was a major investigation in Northern Ireland at the time. There was a number of children killed in a nightclub. So it was an extremely large investigation. I was managing my department's response to the COVID pandemic that was taking place at the time, and was also working in the Police Federation. So I was extremely busy at the time. And on the 11th of August, 2020, about 1:30 in the afternoon, I got a call from a journalist. I didn't know who the person was when she rang, but she said she was a journalist, and she followed the trial of Charlotte Murray, or the investigation into the murder of Charlotte Murray, which is Ireland's first no-body murder. And the reason she contacted me was I'd pushed that to the limits, and she felt there was something wrong with a case. And she told me about this young jockey called Katie Simpson who had died in a suspected suicide in Derry. But she felt, and people she knew felt, that there was something wrong and there was something more to it. She had simple questions like, where was her phone? Where's her laptop? Why did he not ring the police or the ambulance at the time? And it struck me that the previous Saturday I'd seen a Facebook post about some young girl. It looked like she'd been in an accident or something, and we were praying for you, Katie. And I know who put it up as it was Chris Falloon, who was a guy I used to know when I worked in response in Dungannon. And I linked the two then, this girl that had been put on Facebook and people worried about her. And I joined the dots on that. This was the same person. Tanya, as I know her name is now, the journalist told me that people were concerned that she was being controlled. But it wasn't her partner that found her hanging. It was her sister's partner that had found her hanging, which I found odd and peculiar. I would have been more suspicious straight away if it was the partner and there was all these suspicions around it. So I was duty bound. I knew a member of the public had contacted me, so I was duty bound to look into it. So I rang the police in Derry at the time, the major investigation team, and said, "Are you looking at this?" I couldn't get the chief inspector. I got the inspector, and they first of all asked me why was I looking at this, and I knew the way the inspector pointed. He asked me, "Why are you doing this?" That they knew something about it already, and they told me, "Oh, can you not see she tried to kill herself last week?" I always felt a bit stupid about this, that I missed it. But when I went back in to look at it, there was a entry on our police system that she had been found allegedly hanging. She stayed alive for a week in hospital and then she died, but they had it at 2 separate incidents. So if you looked at it, you would say, oh, she tried to kill herself and then she did kill herself. But it was actually the one incident, and the police had recorded it as 2 separate incidents. So I thought, right, they missed this, and they weren't interested in looking at it, and they didn't want me looking at it. And I knew at that point I couldn't take it to my bosses because they would just told me, "You're too busy, let the police in Derry." And just to give you a bit of context, I was based in Armagh, which is in the south of the province, whereas the incident happened in Derry, which is in the north of the province, in a totally different area and outside my jurisdiction from my major investigation team at the time.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you know about Katie's life? So, if you think about a young girl who commits suicide, can you tell us about her personality and her life?
The first thing that strikes me when I first started looking at it was like, it's very seldom young women kill themselves. I'm not saying they don't. There's no science behind this, and it's tragic for families. But then for women then to hang themselves is even more rare. So I looked at that first. What I found out, but I did know anything about Katie at the time, and when I was investigating this by myself, I was taken by that journalist to meet Katie's best friend, who she'd grown up with Katie, and her mother, the friend's mother, and went into their house and spent about 3 hours talking to this family about Katie, and they were just in turmoil about this. But they started telling me about Katie and who Katie was her best friend, and they grew up in school together, and they were as thick as thieves. I mean, in the best possible sense. They were into everything, where it'd be driving quads around, playing on the horse and messing on horses and just getting up to mischief, harmless mischief. But she loved life and she loved horses. Heartbroken the fact that her friend had died, but they were building a picture for me about this other person, Jonathan Creswell, who was the man that found her, and saying how Katie was this lovely, happy young girl. And then as soon as Creswell turned up, if she had to go do something with the horses, he drove into the yard, she just changed utterly and just became this totally different person that kind of just head down and just walked over to the car and knew she was going into a different world at that point. They tried to rescue her once. The Creswell and this group of women were living in in Donegal, and herself and her mother drove up one day to rescue Katie and bring her back. They were just driving out of the yard with Katie, and Creswell was standing in the lane, and Katie just got out of the car, went back with him. I don't believe they were ravaged by guilt, even though they shouldn't feel the guilt, that they could have or should have done more. But like the monster they were painting for me was Creswell, and it was harrowing to hear this young, lovely jockey with such potential, full of life, full of promise, and then they were able to show me this other life she had, which she was being controlled by this guy. I left that house after 3 or 4 hours. I told the man before I left, I said, the only thing I can guarantee you is, one, I'll come back and tell you she's killed herself and why I believe she's taken her own life, or 2, I don't believe she's taken her own life and why I believe she hasn't taken her own life. That's the best I could have offered them, and it's the best I didn't want to. So I was left with no doubt in my mind. I had to find out what happened, just to find the truth, and for them, but also
I think that's really important for the listener, that they understand that Katie was this vibrant, energetic young girl with huge ambitions in the horsing community. At what stage did you meet her family then?
I didn't meet her family for a good while, because at this point it wasn't a murder investigation. It was just a an inquiry that somebody had, and I was looking into it. But the more I looked into it, and I looked at the police log, I could see that her Aunt Paula had rang in, and I rang Paula because she had rang in, and this is the first contact I had with Paula. I asked why was she ringing the police, and she says, "Oh, well, I wanted the car back." And when I asked, could I keep the car, because I wanted to do some more inquiries, and I knew she was, keep it, do whatever you need to do. And I felt from the call she was happy for me to do that. The other person I contacted was her grandfather, because he rang in, and the grandfather, how he spoke is etched in my memory, because you could hear this guy was in pain. The love between a father and child is one thing. The love between a grandfather and child is totally different. It is our grandchild. He was hurting, he was in pain, but he said very little. But every time he hung up the call, he'd say, "Thank you for doing this." I didn't tell him I was doing anything. But each time that call finished, you were just driven to do more, because the pain questions he had, or Paula, the Scots, grandfather, they all had questions. I mean, it's just about giving them the answers they deserve.
Yeah. So take us through that first part of the investigation and what happened.
That was the first couple of days. I had to do it all by myself. I couldn't tell anybody what I was doing, because one, I told you, was outside my jurisdiction, and I'd be told to stop doing it. When first thing I looked at was the autopsy photographs, and I could see that the bruises on her body, all up her legs, these lines of bruises up her legs, her arms, no ligature mark, just a small mark on her neck, but both her hands black and blue and swollen like boxing gloves. And I'm not a specialist or an expert on horse injuries, but knowing from working with horses, I would they did not appear to me to be injuries caused by a horse. I rang the pathologist who done the autopsy, and I said, "Can you explain why she's no ligature mark in her neck?" And the problem he had was, when she passed away, or when she was found hanging a week later, she passed away, so bruises may have dissipated. And he could say was that the bruises may not have been there, but he was told by police that she was found hanging, so that's why he could down possible hanging. And I said, "What about the other bruises?" And he said, "Well, she fell from a horse." And I said, "But did you check if she fought a bit? Are they bruises that usually happen when somebody falls from a horse or is trampled by a horse?" He says, "Well, we don't investigate that. It was possible hanging, and that's what the cause of death was." Because Chris had put up that Facebook post, I rang Chris Falloon, because I knew he was in the horsey industry, and I said, "Chris, could you find out if Katie had fallen from a horse or was trampled by a horse?" It was James. "She'd never be trampled by a horse, but I'll find out if she fell from a horse, because she'd been at a show jumping event on the Sunday before she went to the hospital on Monday, the 3rd of August. And he said, "No, she had a clear round the whole day. She never fell from a horse." So here I have all these bruises on her body. I have fallen from a horse. And then I hear about this other victim of this guy Creswell, who was a woman called Abigail Lyle. And she put a video online through Women's Aid, bringing your violent partner to justice, I think it was. And she describes how this guy Creswell had attacked her. And I spoke to her that week, and she detailed the attack, and it's horrific. How one attack took her into a forest, threatening to bury her, beating her so hard that he sweat and had to take off his top because he was just beating this girl so hard. And in the documentary, the only thing she says during that documentary is shocking, is for her to go through this, that you look why before he's beating her. And she says to stop the beating because my mother's a hero, even though she wasn't. That's what she had to use to stop, to save herself from being killed at that point, was to give him something else. And for her to have to go through that and have the bravery to bring that out in the documentary, and talking to her during the investigation, knowing he did this and threatening to put her into a bath of acid, and this guy's an animal, and this guy, not saying he's killed Katie, but needs to be
The person who has apparently found Katie at the end.
Yeah, and again, you can't jump and say he's killed her. You just have to ask the questions, or answer the questions that people are asking. Where's her phone? Why did he take her down? Why did he not call the ambulance? Why did he try to take her to hospital? Simple questions.
So there's so many things there that you're going to go into more detail about, but you have all of these red flags. So are you now properly investigating this?
No, not at that point. I did all this work at the 11th, 12th, 13th, and then on the 14th, I knew I had an opportunity, because in our major investigation teams, you do one weekend on call and 5, so it means that you cover the whole of Northern Ireland, not just your patch. So I knew at 2 o'clock we started on call. So at 2 o'clock, I met my senior officer and he said, look at this investigation, and this young girl died. And I gave him the information that I gathered over the 3 or 4 days I've been working on it. And in fairness to him, he said, yeah, we're going to work on this weekend. It warrants investigation. So that was right. I succeeded in doing what I wanted to do. It's doing a proper look at this. Then from the information I gathered, I taken forward, and my senior officer went, yeah, we need to look at this. So that was success in some respects. So in that weekend, we got all our team together and worked on it for about 2 days. And the thing that I suppose concerned me that weekend, all the information I gathered posed questions that need to be answered. Then that weekend, there was a girl, Hay Robb, who'd been spoke to. Hay was on her way from Banbridge up to Derry to meet Creswell the morning Katie was allegedly found hanging. And she's the one that called the ambulance. So I want to know, how did this come about? How did you manage to be up in Derry calling the ambulance? So she gave a statement about leaving Banbridge to go up to Derry to clip horses, and shortly before she arrived, Creswell had been on the phone to her. He'd been dropping his kids to his mother's house, and he's on the phone, and he felt she was keeping her on the phone, and then he arrives at the house and goes, oh, Katie's hanging, call an ambulance. So this is her version of events. That's okay, you take the statement. But then she rings the police back about 3 hours later and says, oh, my friend Jill Robinson rang me. She told me, make sure to tell you that Katie had been trampled by a horse.
Like an afterthought.
Yeah, but why is this woman called Jill Robinson ringing another woman to make sure you tell the police she was trampled by a horse? Katie died from hanging herself. Why are you telling us about bruises? And that was a real red flag to me. Like, what's going on here? Why is this woman making sure to tell police that she'd been trampled by a horse? And that stuck with me, right? There's something not right here. Still, it's just another question that needed to be answered. So on that Sunday, I committed to the investigation log work that needed to be carried out from here on in. And on the Monday, I asked for 2 major investigation detectives and 2 CID detectives to partner up and to interview Jonathan Creswell and Katie's sister, Katie Simpson, who is his partner, on Monday at 7:30 in the evening. And
Christina is Katie's sister.
Christina's Katie's sister, so yeah, and that's Creswell's partner. And the 2 children together, 2 young kids, 5 and 1, I think was 2 at the time, and then quite young children. So the police took statements from them. The police met them at 7:30, and I was anxious to hear what happened. But the thing that shocked me was that they never took a statement, which you should. I told them they had to take statements, because it's only at that point when somebody commits to a statement, they are committing to a court document that can be used in court. And, you know, this is you cannot tell a lie in that. You have to tell the truth. But if they don't commit a statement, they can say what they like. But the one thing that did kind of pique my interest was Creswell. And he was saying that he had established that Katie's Find My iPhone was turned off. Why does the partner of Katie's sister need to know if Katie's Find My iPhone is turned off? It just was, what's the relationship here? What's the dynamic? And caused me concern. Then later that week, I committed to the log that everything needed to be done to investigate this, as Jonathan Creswell was a dangerous sociopath and he was a danger to women. And we needed to establish the truth as to what had happened. And that was based on the evidence I'd gathered. It wasn't based on any hunch of mine. There was clear evidence the guy was dangerous. And
in the previous situation with Abigail, was he convicted of that?
He was convicted of that. He spent 6 months in prison when he was convicted of that. And again, with the sociopaths, he was telling everybody that he had to plead guilty because of the legal team she had. You know, and the most horrendous thing looking back, that was 2009, it's not generations ago, was that when he left prison, the Horsey community in Armagh had a welcome home party for him in the Armagh City Hotel. And then he ended up on a drinks commercial for the Grand National as the main man, even though he committed these horrendous offences.
So it's like there's two Creswells. There's this charming outside person, and then there's behind the scenes Creswell.
Like all sociopaths, they'll come across as the most charming, helpful individual. But if you're a threat to them, they'll isolate you. They will ridicule you. And controlling the narrative, controlling the image. And it's all about image. And when somebody is a dangerous sociopath like that and dealing with so many domestic murders, that's why I wrote that in the log. But what then transpired a number of hours later, I got a call from a chief inspector in the major investigation team saying, see what you wrote on that log, how stupid you are. He said, if this log is disclosable in court, this is have to go to trial, it shows you've got a built-in bias to this chap. He said, don't be a fucking idiot and stop what you're doing. That never happened to me before. I had a chief inspector in major investigation team, and to look at the log of his sudden death for a uniformed officer who's dealing with a sudden death. Why was he monitoring the log? Or who was monitoring the log and telling him? So I knew then there was something wrong with the investigation that had taken place, and there was something really disturbing I felt. So that drove me on the 20th of August. Then it was a Friday night, I'll never forget it. I stayed up to about 3 a.m. doing a report. So all through my investigations, I looked at the scene log where she was meant to have hung herself. And I tried to simulate it in my own house. How can you hang yourself the way Katie was meant to have done it? Plus, in the scene photographs, there's a horse blanket covering the first probably half or the third of the banister. So she couldn't have done it there. And the further you go down the banister, it's not possible because what Creswell was always saying when he went in, her face was kissing the wood. Every time he spoke to police that day, she was kissing the wood. But what he meant there is the wooden panel that runs along. It is the roof of the ground floor and the floor of the first floor when it runs along the stairs, and the spindles of the staircase come into it. So he was saying her face was kissing the wood and her feet were barely, she could have just stepped back and stepped up. So the further you go up, down the banister, the less likely that was to happen. So it's down more the deep side. And I couldn't see where she could have done it from the photographs. And I put all that in the report, and my last paragraph of the report was, there's too many questions outstanding and these need to be answered in a major investigation team. I sent it to chief inspectors, my own, and the chief inspector that was covering the area in Derry. And
why do you think you got that phone call from the chief inspector?
That's an in question, and a question that needs to be answered. There's currently a police investigation going on. A criminal investigation into the corruption around this. it is something I want to talk about later when that investigation is finished. I do have my thoughts on it, and I do have information on it, which I've given to police. But it's something that will have to be discussed at length at a later stage. But it is a logical question, and is one we can't answer for the moment till that investigation is finished, and in case there is a criminal charge is brought.
Okay, so what happened after you submitted your initial report then?
Nothing happened at that point. When I submitted a report, I did know that the police in Derry were taking the attitude, who the hell did I think I was? And my chief inspector was telling me that there was emails circulating in Derry from senior officers stating that nobody was communicating with me in relation to the Katie Simpson investigation, which I found disturbing. And he even said himself, my senior officer, that they're playing a dangerous game. Now, the thing, when I look back on this, and I look back on this investigation, why is that senior officer saying they're playing a dangerous game? Why was it left up to me? Surely he's the senior officer. He's the person that should be taking this to his superiors, instead of leaving it to me as a sergeant to really be like tethered goat. If you want to raise your head above the parapet here and get hurt, you do it. I'm not doing it, was his attitude. That's the way I look back on it. And it is the way it, but I knew the more I looked into this, the more pushback I was getting from the police in Derry, and I found it intimidated me, just drove me on further, and I wasn't going to be bullied into shutting down, finding the truth about what happened to Katie.
I look forward to doing that podcast later. So
yeah, it will be, and when it is all finished, it is going to be toxic for the police. It's going to be politically toxic because there is political interference also. And we'll talk about that when the time comes. So after the report is finished, I knew there was this intimidation taking place, and people not wanting to assist in finding out what actually happened to Katie. Again, I wasn't saying she's being murdered. It's just find out the truth. The family have questions, her friends have questions. You have to just do right by Katie at this point. So I couldn't do anything more myself at that point, because I'd shown my hand. I'd said to the police in Derry, this is what needs to be done. So it was over them to do it. I had no jurisdiction over them. I had no authority over them. So it was really up to them now to do something about it. Then I got a call in October from a sergeant in the major investigation team in Derry to say that a woman in the PPS, and she felt her husband had information around the Katie Simpson inquiry. Well, she gave me this guy's phone number, and I rang up, and his name was Paul Lusby, and he was actually a cousin of Creswell's.
mm-hmm.
And he was so adamant that work needed to be done around this investigation, and the information he had, I wasn't aware of, that Katie had a boyfriend. That was news to me. That nurses in the hospital had concerns over what happened to Katie. One nurse had gone to the police, left her night shift. Nothing was done. Huge amount of information, and he was in Derry, he was around all the people, and he had just this wealth of information. So the chief inspector in the major investigation team, I emailed him and said, listen, this guy's come forward. I was given his number. Get one of your detectives to talk to him. And his reply to me in email was, who gave you this number? So he's more interested in finding out who's leaking information to me from within the police to another police officer, trying to help the inquiry. So I rang Paul a week later, said, have the police spoken to you? He said no. So I said, Paul, go to the police in Strand Road, tell them we want to make a statement, and just tell them everything you told me. So after he went into the police, he rang me and he was delighted. He said the police were going to launch an investigation. I was delighted. We were both delighted. Job done. Result, they're going to investigate it. So I was delighted. We joked, laughed, and said, right, listen, we never knew each other. We at least didn't have any met, but we just talked over the phone as so many times, and he was so passionate about it, and it was great. Then the next morning he rang me and he's upset and tears, and Got a phone call, saying police, no, we're not going to investigate it. So what changed overnight?
What happened there?
Again, that's for
Later day.
That's for this investigation to find out why did that change. Was he told one day there's going to be an investigation, and the next day there wasn't. So that drove both of us on, and he was constantly in touch with me with information about other individuals that may have information, nurses' names, describing what the nurses had seen. And the picture he painted to me was shocking, that he went into hospital, she went into A&E first and then into intensive care. And they refused to wash her because they don't know this isn't a hanging. And the nurses could see that this isn't right.
So they instinctively knew somebody should be taking some samples somewhere.
Yeah, or they did the police to be coming in and to do a examination of Katie. The bruises, the vaginal bleeding, which caused them concern. And she said it wasn't right. They've seen hanging victims come in. They were saying this was not a hanging victim. So they went to the doctors and said this needs to be investigated. And the doctors said, no, we're here to make people better. We're not here to investigate. And it transpired when we interviewed the doctors. Well, yeah, that's what they said. And it even got so bad that one nurse left her night shift to go to the place in Derry and say, you need to look at this. Nothing was done while she was in hospital that week, while she was still alive.
What is that normal process? Like, should they alert police of things that they've seen?
There is a review being done by the Minister of Justice in relation to this, and it is looking at what the hospital did or didn't do and what they should have done. And there has to be some safety valve there where this happens. Yes, the doctors and nurses are there to make people better. But when they see something as glaring as this, and the nurses...
And the victim is not capable of speaking for herself.
Yeah, and the nurses see hanging victims come in. Like, the nurses were really still upset. And this was months later when I was interviewing them, and one of the nurses crying to me on the phone, they still remember the bed she was in. This is the impact it had on them. You know, when it's just shouldn't have happened. And this whole, why I'm doing this podcast, why I did documentaries, this shouldn't happen again. And it's these things that you're looking at me going, but surely that shouldn't be the case. But that's so with all the information I knew I had to do more. And the journalist who contacted me at the outset, she was agitating, please, what are you doing about this? And a culminator was I was contacted to attend a conference call on the 18th of December 2020. And that was to be chaired by a superintendent in Belfast. And on that call was the Chief Inspector for Major Investigation Team in Derry, Chief Inspector for CID in Derry, Inspector and CID in Derry, and my own new Chief Inspector in Armagh, and then one response woman, uniformed officer, who was the investigating officer for Katie's sudden death, as it was. So the call started with one of the chief inspectors saying, there's no reason for this call to be taking place. The only reason this call is taking place is because somebody in this line is leaking information to the press. And I was shocked at them having this cut at me straight away. In fairness to the superintendent, he says, no, he's authorised to talk to that journalist because she's getting him information.
Yeah.
And then it was just having a cut at me and a big report I put in on the 20th that it was all just supposition. There was no evidence. It was just it was just supposition is what they're saying, and the pathologist has said it was hanging. So there's no one we had here. She committed suicide. And
this is still before you were actually have launched an investigation, right?
It still is just, well, she's killed herself, and that's how it was being treated by the police at this point. So every officer was asked on the call, what do you think? And they all went, suicide. All the chief inspectors, even my own, suicide. Then the inspector, suicide. And it was just making me look like a fool. And only for this young female officer, she was young in age, young in service. And it was sudden death. And she had more backbone than any of those senior officers. And she said, no, sir, I believe James. We thought it suspicious on the day. He still thinks suspicious. And only for her saying that, it gave me a stay of execution. Otherwise, it was dead. And only for her having that bravery in front of all those male officers. And I owe a lot to her. I've spoken to her after, a couple of months after. Sadly, she's left the police now as a result of it as well. And she just couldn't continue after that investigation, into investigations, trying to second guess. Sad, and she had the bravery that none of those men had. So because of her and what she said, the superintendent said, okay, we need to do more work on this. So for the next 2 weeks, my team, Armagh, were to interview friends and family, get more information. Team in Derry were interviewing nurses to get more information. So it was kind of, you felt like I can actually if you do something now, like you do a bit more. At the same time, I'm still talking to Paula. I'm not telling her we're doing anything because I can't give them false hope. Couldn't give anybody any false hope because we had to find out the facts. So because it was the 18th of December, we broke for Christmas. So then it came around on the 11th, 12th, 13th of January 2021. So started off myself and my colleague, up to Derry to talk to friends and family. So first friends we were speaking to. In the house Katie was alleged to have hung herself is where she lived with Jonathan Creswell, Christina, her sister, the 2 children, and then this other woman comes to Montmorency Wright. So they all lived in the house together. Katie and Rose would travel down to just outside Drapers, the trainer's yard, to buy their horses. Christina's sister would go to Matherfelt to buy their horses. So they all left every morning to go buy horses. So when Katie never turned up for work, which was meant to go with Rose, we went to speak to Rose first. Rose, tell us what happened. So what Rose told us was that on the night Katie came back from the show in Derry, she walked into the house. Rose was sleeping in the living room, opened the door, said, "Nelson trampled me," which is a horse. Closed the door, went up to bed. That was Rose's account. I said, why didn't she come to work? Oh, because she said she wasn't well. So good to see Rose. And we just had a photograph from the house, from the scene, from the day Katie had met the phone herself. Linda showed her the photographs and she looks at one photograph and says, there's her phone. Her phone's a huge part of the inquiry. And she's telling me, there's her phone. But it wasn't a phone. I knew it wasn't a phone. It was a little makeup box. But that's the statement she wanted to make. So why is this girl telling me that's her phone? So took the statement as clearly this girl is lying. This is her friend. Katie's dead. Why is she lying about this phone? So it's making me kind of angry inside, but I have to take the statement. Then as we're leaving, she goes, oh, but she fell the Thursday before she died as well. And I said to my colleague, I'm not taking that fucking statement. And he goes, no, we have to take the statement. I said, you take it. I'm not taking. I was so angry because clearly she's lying. So he's taking the statement. She's at Victoria Bridge. She's riding, jumping over fences. The horse stops and she goes over the fence. And I said, what did she fall on? And she goes, sand. And I said, well, the sand is soft. No. The sand was wet. It was hard. So I looked at the weather forecast for that period, 2 weeks, and it hadn't rained. I said, well, there's poor drainage. It's always wet. And I'm like, just, why are you lying? I just couldn't believe it. We went to meet Jill, her other friend, and Jill lived in Oma. And Jill's yard at the farm where the horse was, where she was meant to be trampled by a horse. So this is important. Did this trampling take place? So went and met Jill. This was, never forget driving up into the yard. It was January, winter's morning, and pull up, and there's Creswell parked in the yard as well. And we were meant to be doing this on the quiet, and there's Creswell sitting there, and it's kind of shit. But thankfully he just drove off. He saw us, knew we were police. We're in plain clothes, but kind of figure. So I got out to speak to Jill. I said, Jill, Katie's trampled by a horse here. And she was, yeah, it's trampled out in field out there. Did you see it happen, Jill? She says, no. I said, I can see where grass is trampled. I said, how did you know Katie was trampled by a horse there? It's like, was her face imprinted on the ground? And I was being facetious because here's another girl lying.
Where she?
Yeah. So she goes, but come over here. And she takes me into a horse box. So look, she could get bruised here as well in the horse box. And I looked at her and says, why are you telling me bruises? Katie hung herself. And I just walked away. It's like, why are you trying to tell us about these bruises? Katie hung herself. So it was causing more concern by these, because they're trying to say Katie's got all these bruises, and now someone's trying to tell us where her phone is.
And it's bizarre for her friend circle to be telling you that and trying to somehow make you think something has happened.
Yeah, but what are they trying to make me think has happened? She's killed herself. Why do they want me to think she's bruised herself? And this, it just didn't sense to me, and I was trying to join the dots.
Did it create other suspects at that time?
No, but there was no shit this time. We were just trying to find the truth. And when you're trying to find the truth, the more and more questions are popping up. You know, you have to understand there's no murder investigation at this point. It's just trying to establish what happened to Katie. But as you're going along, things are not making sense. Myself and my colleague with years of experience dealing with homicides, we never experienced anything like it. Then the following day, went to meet Shane, and I never forget, met him at this Katie's boyfriend, and met him at on the showground park. Mirroring the police car, he pulls in a van, freezing cold, and he goes, "What's this about?" And said, "We're just doing investigations into what happened to Katie." And he seemed a bit apprehensive, but he said he had an old phone with text on it, and he explains what had happened. He'd been friends with Katie, and they started going out, but they didn't get much time together because Creswell was always controlling Katie.
How long were they dating for?
So it would have been only a number of weeks, but not getting much time together was mostly over text. Out of Katie's car, we got phones all kept for Katie's, and it was disgusting. The text between her and Creswell, like a text would be ring, one after the other, ring you bitch, fucking ring me, you ring me or I'm going to. And just all those texts, it was just horrendous. But then when I looked at Shane's phone, it's normal text between a man and woman.
Like a young boyfriend guy.
Yeah. So he had this phone, and he told us what happened was they'd been going out a short while. He was in Derry, she was out in Moy in Armagh because she'd done another show in Armagh on the Saturday. So Saturday night, she was out. So she banged him. He travels all the way down 60 odd miles to pick her up. And they both stayed in my mother's house that night. The first night spent a night together. And then he travelled back to Derry next morning, and she went to her show in Armagh. So we sent you a show with the text messages. So the next day, I was aware that the major investigation team in Derry hadn't spoken to any nurses yet. One of the nurses was also a family friend, this girl called Miriam. And I said to Miriam, I said, "You go to the police today and make your statement." She goes, "I will." So never forget, I was in the car park at McDonald's on the Crescent Road in Derry waiting to meet Shane. When Shane arrives in, Miriam's in, she's going to make her statement to the police in Derry. So Shane's in the car, and he's sitting in the back seat, myself and my colleague in the front, and he hands me the phone, and he shows me the text messages. And I looked at the text messages, and my jaw dropped. It was nice text messages between the two of them, how they left the house and just joking about what had gone on the night before. A nice, innocent text. And then about midday, "You need to tell Creswell's going to ring you shortly, or Johnny's going to ring you shortly. Tell him you were with your dad last night. Somebody has seen you travel through Roma." So what happened was somebody saw Shane traveling north that morning, and now Creswell knew, because somebody in the horsey community, so now Creswell knew. So the text was, Johnny's going to ring you. Make sure you tell him you were with your dad last night. And he was like, "Why are we doing this? Why are we lying? He's hardly going to kill you." And then the next text, Katie goes, "Please, please, I'm begging you." He'll go mad. He's okay. Or I'll say it was with your dad. But then this was the motive. This is what. And I'll never get reading the text from Shane. He'll hardly kill you. Katie knew how dangerous it was if Cresworth had did this, but we didn't. He didn't know at the time. He didn't even know where we were stowing across. I shocked reading these text messages, and phone rang. It was Miriam. So I gave with the text to Colin, read that. Miriam says, "Oh, I've met the police." Said, "Did you tell them everything? All the nurses saw, all the suspicions they had." "Yeah, told them everything." "Brilliant. Did you make a statement?" "No." He said there was no need. I was shocked because she had really important information. So I said, "Miriam, go back, tell them you want to make a statement, and tell them you want to make a statement." So I got back into the car with Shane, and then the phone rings, Chief Inspector from Derry, saying, "When's the last time you spoke to Miriam Sweeney?" I said, "About 5 minutes ago." "But she can't be used as a witness because she's lied." "So what are you talking about?" Says, "We asked her when she last spoke to you, and she said it was yesterday, but you're saying it's 5 minutes ago." I couldn't believe a Chief Inspector doing this. The statement is taken by Detective Constables. Here's a Chief Inspector. So I said, "Just take the statement." And he turned around and started saying, who the fuck think you are?" Says, "You're a disgrace. Everybody thinks you're a disgrace. You're just trying to turn suicide into murder here. You're trying to create another Charlotte Murray for yourself. Everybody thinks you're a joke." And just this vitriolic abuse going on. In the end, I just hung up. Said enough was enough. Because of what I'd seen in the car, seen the text messages, this was serious then. This was, in my view, murder investigation. So later that day, I went to my senior officers. I said, "Get those people off my back." I did another report, submitted to Superintendent, and on another conference call a week later, they all asked the same question again: who thinks this was murder, who didn't. And most of the call said, "Yeah, it's a murder," apart from the two in Derry saying, "No, it wasn't." And he said, "No, it has to be a murder investigation launched," and he was given to me to my team to investigate. So we're 60 miles away from where this happened. Yeah, it was given to us to investigate. Yet there was a major investigation team in Derry where it happened, and he knew not to give it to them. But at that point, there was now a murder investigation. But we couldn't tell anybody it was a murder investigation because we couldn't alert into it. So we still had to do it on the quiet.
So that concludes our very first podcast. And I truly just want to thank James for sharing Katie's story with us today. It's an incredible story. And again, if you want to watch more, go check the documentary Death of a Show Jumper. If you've been moved by the story that you've heard today, or you're a family who feel like you have a similar circumstance or have lost a loved one and you're not sure about the circumstances, please reach out to James and his incredible team at www.thekatietrust.com. Likewise, but obviously different, if you're somebody who can help, you have some sort of legal expertise, some sort of trauma support expertise, we would also love to hear from you, because it's these partnerships that are going to help us reach more families and help them. If you're able to help in any way, please do go to their website, www.thekatietrust.com, and help. Stay tuned. We have more amazing podcasts coming. We have more amazing stories, and I'd thank you for listening today.